Good evening, everyone. We have a wonderful study prepared tonight. I look forward to participating in this study with everyone today. Just so you know, for this study, we're trying something new. We removed the QR code that's usually here, and I've posted for those of you who are on YouTube. You can access the link on YouTube for the donation link if you like. And for those of you who are on Facebook, actually there's a little link area in the comment. You can click there and you should be able to access the link. If not, it's also showing up right now in the comment area. So this is a new function Facebook has where you can click on the link but stay in the study, keep following along and listening to the study. So I'll show it in the beginning and in the end of the study session. I won't do it during the study because I have to switch the screens to do that, but at least you have access to access that link if you need it. Okay, look forward to participating in this study session with you, and just a couple more minutes before we start. Thank you. So it's time for us to begin. Look forward to this study session. Like always, everything that we feel, everything that we experience, all thoughts and feelings, let us, in the name of Messiah, which is one with Meishu-sama, during the study session, surrender everything back to God, recognizing that God is receiving everything, each one of us, our souls, our consciousness back in heaven, so that we may be newly born as children of God, messiahs. Okay? Okay, should be okay here. Okay, so let us begin the study with the sacred oath. With great fear of God, we acknowledge that the Lord God is our true Father, the one and only God. We revere Meishu-sama as the model for all humanity and as our own example to follow. Meishu-sama, who was born anew as a true child of God, the Messiah, by receiving the divine will that God accomplished in heaven. We believe that Jesus Christ, who 2,000 years ago embodied the name of Messiah, the name most holy and high, is serving the Lord God in unity with Meishu-sama. And we regard the messages of Kyoshu-sama, who reveals to us the will of Meishu-sama in this material world, as the sole, absolute, and irreplaceable foundation in advancing our mission here on earth. Words of prayer. God, I acknowledge that you are alive. Within me, you are alive. I thank you for nurturing me to be newly born as your child. May this blessing be shared with all. In the name of Messiah, which is one with Meishu-sama, I surrender myself to you. Please use me as you wish. Okay, thank you. The hymn for today, for our study, is the following. Why do we exist? We are here to bring joy to God. We exist to bring happiness to God. That is the only reason why we are made to exist. Kyoshu-sama. One more time. Why do we exist? We are here to bring joy to God. We exist to bring happiness to God. That is the only reason why we are made to exist. This hymn really touched me deeply because we as human beings have taught ourselves, right? We have lived our lives seeking our own happiness. But here Kyoshu-sama is showing how we are here to please God, for God's happiness. So I believe that without really bringing this true happiness to God, this true joy, we can't feel what the real happiness is, what our true joy is. So let's keep this in mind as we go through our study today. Is everything okay? We might be having some skip frames. I'm not sure if the frames are skipping. It's showing here that we have some skipped frames. Is that correct? No, it's kidding? Okay. Let me see if I can fix that. One moment. Give me a second here, everybody. I think I'm running too many windows, so I'll have to shut this off. Shut this off. It's here. Okay. This might solve the issue. I'm not sure. So please bear with me if this frames are skipping. Not sure if it's skipping also on Facebook. It shouldn't, but we might be having some skip frames. We'll try our best. Thank you for your understanding. So one more time, why do we exist? We are here to bring joy to God. We exist to bring happiness to God. That is the only reason why we are made to exist. So as we seek to become truly happy, as we seek happiness, it's important for us to keep that in mind. Our actions that are going to bring or try to bring happiness to myself, or are they the actions of bringing happiness to God? So in a small review from last week we studied the sacred word of Meishu-sama, good and evil. And this has been very connected with the previous weeks that we've been studying. It's connected with the study today. So I'd like to do a quick recap of these sacred words. And again, I apologize if the frames are freezing. I have a feeling that they are. So in the first part of the study last week, we looked at some hymns from Meishu-sama that was shared in the service. And in this service where these sacred words were read, we had the following hymns. Happy are those who know that, while human eyes might be deceived, God's eyes can never be deceived. Yes, it is true that You may be able to cover others' eyes, but you can never conceal anything from your own. You animals who wear the skin of humans, I will save and remake you into true humans. So, as I mentioned last week, this is a very strong hymn by Meishu-sama, right? He's saying that he's to remake all of us, all humanity, into true humans, right? Into true divine humans. The second point that we looked at was the root of evil. And in this sacred word, Meishu-sama says that the root of all evil is nurtured in the disbelief of the invisible, right? Of not believing in God, truly believing in God. And as we reflected last week, it's not enough to just say, I believe in God, and therefore there's no evil, right? It's really to believe that God is alive within each one of us. And I think that we are now being nurtured to understand. Okay, I've reset the screen. Hopefully we don't have any more skip frames, but we might. It looks like it's skipping still. So I ask for your patience. And if you can hear me, then we'll go along even if you can't read the screen. Okay? So you can follow by my voice. So because we're connected to God through our spiritual cords, and as Meishu-sama says, our souls were entrusted to us by God, therefore, eventually, we all will have to repent. Right? This is not something that one or two, all of us, because we all have lived this life based on our own convenience, right? On our human ego, our way of seeing the world. And we are now being held accountable for that, right? That moment is at hand. And Meishu-sama also clearly states in these sacred words, right, that the way to overcome temptation, the way to overcome ourselves in this journey, right, this animalistic self, is no other than through the true belief in God. It says, those who believe in God, on the contrary, are firm in their belief that while human eyes can be fooled, God's eyes can never be fooled. And so they will never succumb to any temptation under any circumstance. So if we find ourselves succumbing to any kind of temptation, right, then it's a way that we can reflect on ourselves. Do we really truly believe in God at that moment? Are we really truly seeking God? No matter how good and virtuous someone appears to be, if this person does not believe in God, there is always a risk that they might one day turn into evil. So, in the end, this kind of person belongs to evil. And as I mentioned last week during our study, right, we are studying this, but not to go out and start judging others and others' postures and activities. On the contrary, we can't do that. We're not God. But to reflect on our own posture, on our own actions, right? And then to truly free ourselves from this animalistic nature, to rise into becoming this divine humans, we surrender all these thoughts and all these feelings of all humanity that is flourishing within us, that God is illuminating within us, and return that to God. That is the only way to truly free ourselves from this animalistic part of ourselves that exists. And then last but not least, Meishu-sama says here, a truly civilized person is a person where a collection of these people is a paradise on earth, right? So the people who are really truly able to free themselves from their animalistic self and become these divine humans, right? through their true belief in God, are truly civilized people. In that sense, he says, in this sense, I believe that a truly civilized person is one who has freed themselves from their animality, and that culture will progress only when animalized humans are turned into divine ones. To sum this up, the place where divine humans gather is what I call a paradise on earth. So we see a very important mission that we have, for we are now learning the true mechanism, right, through our sone, of how to not only become these divine humans and gather in this place where these divine humans exist, but also to return to such heaven, to this heaven, to God's heaven, with all humanity, all of creation. So with this in mind, I'd like to go into our second part of our study today. How can we truly live in this new era, right? What is necessary for us to achieve, to live in this new era? And for this purpose, we have the video that we just received from Meishu-sama. It's Meishu-sama's message number 2, A New Era, September 2020. It was just released maybe a few days ago, and I'd like to share that with you. If you have seen it already, please take the opportunity to appreciate it again and gather more from it. As I've noticed, every time I watch, I'm learning new things. So let's take this opportunity. For all of those who haven't, this is a great opportunity. So bear with us as we put the video for you. It's just a 10-minute video, so stay tuned and let's hear this message directly from Meishu-sama, our future spiritual leader.
"66 years ago, on April 19th, 1954, 10 months before his ascension, Meishu-sama received a purification, a brain stroke. After this purification, Meishu-sama said something over and over again, something that was truly grave and important for us, followers of Meishu-sama. He said, 'From now on, we enter the world of Sonnen. That is the world of mind and thought. From now on, we enter the world of Sonnen. Johrei is not so important anymore. Sonnen comes first, so pray in your hearts.' I repeat, Meishu-sama said, 'From now on, we enter the world of Sonnen. Johrei is not so important anymore. Sonnen comes first, so pray in your hearts.' Maybe many of you did not know this statement of Meishu-sama until today, or until very recently. But now that you know, what would you do about it? What should we do about it? Should we just ignore it? Should we just interpret it in a way that suits us, so that we can continue what we've been doing up until now? Or should we receive it just as it is? Let me emphasize that this statement, 'From now on, we enter the world of Sonnen, Johrei is not so important anymore,' is not something said by Kyoshu-sama. It came from Meishu-sama. It came from Meishu-sama. Johrei is not so important anymore. It came from Meishu-sama. And you know what else? For a very long time, we've been ignoring it. This statement of Meishu-sama was published in our official church publication in 1955, right after the ascension of Meishu-sama. But we've been ignoring it for a long time, saying that Johrei is the most important practice for us, when Meishu-sama in fact said that it is no longer that important. One day, when you go to heaven and meet Meishu-sama, he might ask you, 'I said to you that Johrei is not so important anymore, and that from now on, we enter the world of Sonnen. Remember this? What have you done about it?' He might ask you something like this. How are you going to answer this question? What are you going to say to Meishu-sama? So, we have to decide. how should we respond to this statement of Meishu-sama regarding Johrei and Sonen? It is up to each one of us to decide. To those who decide to ignore it or interpret it in a way that suits their needs, I have nothing to say except that I hope they can become true followers of Meishu-sama one day. To those who are willing to accept it and believe in Meishu-sama with all their heart, I have good news. We have Kyoshu-sama with us. If we accept this statement of Meishu-sama 100%, it is clear that we cannot have Johrei as our main practice any longer, as he's saying that it is not so important anymore. How can we continue something that Meishu-sama said is not so important anymore? And for us, it is quite hard, isn't it, if we have to abandon Johrei altogether. But Kyoshu-sama is saying that we don't need to abandon Johrei. He's saying that the true Johrei is not done by us, with us raising our hands. He's saying that the true Johrei is done by God. Within each one of us, within all humanity, God is raising his hand of Johrei to us. Kyoshu-sama is saying that God emits his light of Johrei to each one of us so that we can return to where the light is, to where God is, so that we can be one with God and live with him in heaven. Meishu-sama said, Johrei is not so important anymore. Kyoshu-sama is saying that what Meishu-sama meant by this is that the physical act of raising one's hand when practicing Johrei is not so important anymore. Meishu-sama said, from now on, we enter the world of Sonen. Sonen comes first, so pray in your hearts. Kyoshu-sama is saying that what Meishu-sama meant by this is that we have to acknowledge that God and his hand of Johrei exist in our hearts, and that the true work of Johrei by God is carried out within us all the time. Kyoshu-sama is saying that what Meishu-sama meant by statement is that God will no longer carry out his work of salvation through us raising our hands of Johrei, but God will carry it out through our hearts. And what does it mean for God to carry out his work of salvation through our hearts? In our everyday lives, through many things, like through our relationships with our family, friends, or neighbors, many emotions come to our hearts, don't they? Those emotions come to you because the light of God is illuminating your hearts. Imagine, when light shines on something, it creates a shadow, doesn't it? It is exactly like this. All the negative thoughts and feelings you have are like the shadows. God is illuminating your hearts, and he is showing you the shadows so that he can save them. Our task is to obediently surrender what we feel into the hand of God, because he's always raising his hand of Johrei to us. He's always illuminating our hearts. Meishu-sama said, from now on, we need to pray in our hearts. He's saying that from now on, that is the task of his followers. So let us pray in our hearts and surrender whatever we feel into the hand of God, because that is how we can truly serve in the work of Johrei in the era of Sonen. Now I need to say something else. When Meishu-sama said that from now on we enter the world of Sonen, Johrei is not so important anymore, is he only talking about Johrei? Did he refer only to Johrei? I don't think so. I think he's also referring to all the physical activities that he left for us, including nature farming and art. Let's think. Meishu-sama is saying that we are now entering the world of Sonen, the world of mind and thought. Sonen, our mind and thought, is something invisible, isn't it? Meishu-sama is saying that we have entered the world where things invisible come first. That means until then, we were living in the world where things visible came first. And what was the visible activity that was held in the highest regard in our church when Meishu-sama made his statement? Johrei, isn't that right? By saying that Johrei is not so important anymore and that we enter the world of Sonen, Meishu-sama was telling us that God's salvation will now be carried out not through things visible like Johrei and other physical activities, but through things invisible like our sonen, mind, and thought. How revolutionary Meishu-sama was. How revolutionary Meishu-sama was. He must have known that his followers relied on Johrei so much, but he said that it was not so important anymore. He said that it was time to move on. Why? Wasn't it because God told him so? Wasn't it because God told Meishu-sama, I will now use the sonen of all humanity to advance my salvation? And receiving this will of God, Meishu-sama left us this message that is so crucial for us, followers of Meishu-sama. So how can we ignore this message? How can we turn away from such an important message that Meishu-sama left for us? And remember, he was in a lot of pain from the brain stroke too. He left this message while in such pain. Why? Wasn't it for us? Wasn't it for all humanity? Wasn't it for the salvation of all humanity? So now that we know this message of Meishu-sama, how can we ignore it any longer? How can we ignore it? And we have to remind ourselves, he left this message more than 60 years ago. From now on, we enter the world of sonen. Johrei is not so important anymore. He left this message more than 60 years ago. The time has come for us to wake up. We have to wake up. We can no longer ignore what Meishu-sama left for us. How can we do that? The time has really come for us to accept Meishu-sama, to accept his true will. And we must thank Kyoshu-sama. We must thank Kyoshu-sama for allowing us to accept the true will of Meishu-sama. Actually, thanking is not enough, is it? Who taught us the importance of surrendering our thoughts and feelings to God? Who taught us the true meaning of Johrei? Who taught us the true will of Meishu-sama? Without Kyoshu-sama, I'm pretty sure we'd still be wandering in the darkness, carrying out the divine work in ways that are convenient for us. Without Kyoshu-sama, we'd still be ignoring Meishu-sama and his true message. We really have to engrave this deep into our hearts, and we should never take any credit for the new faith of Meishu-sama that Kyoshu-sama is now revealing to us. One last thing. Meishu-sama said that the name of Messiah is the holy name that can bring final salvation. So let us do everything in the name of Messiah, so that we can serve in the salvation of the whole world. Thank you, and may God's grace be with you all.
What a wonderful message. Strong message, right? It touches our soul as Masaki-sama talks. Really giving us a wake-up call. A very strong wake-up call. That's one of the first impressions I had. As a young member, when I first became a member, I've heard Meishu-sama's sacred word when he talks about us one day living in the age of day, right? In the age of Sonen. And for many years, I looked forward to living in such an age, not knowing what it was, but living in that era, living in the age of Sonen. But I had no idea what it meant. And I had no idea we were already in that era. As Masaki-sama mentioned, right, 66 years ago, Meishu-sama made this statement. 66 years ago, Meishu-sama was trying to show us we were already in the age of Sonen. But I, for many, many years, thought that we were still living in the age of night. Seeking to one day, maybe not even in my lifetime, to live in this new era, in this age of Sonen. But 66 years ago, Meishu-sama was saying that. I've copied some of the text transcribed from the video, This is not the official transcription, okay? So please don't mind some of the punctuation, and it's not separated by paragraphs. It's just so we can study some of the points that I've picked up from this video I'd like to share with you. I divided it in 2 parts, so we can do this half of it today and half of it next week. But it's just a few points, so it's not the official transcription. Just keep that in mind. Looks like some mistakes here, right? 66 years ago, on April 19, 1954, 10 months before his ascension, Meishu-sama received a purification, a brain stroke. After this purification, Meishu-sama said something over and over again. Something that was truly grave and important for us followers of Meishu-sama. This was a tremendous statement on Meishu-sama's part, right after his purification. He said, "From now on, we enter the world of Sonin." That is the world of mind and thoughts. That's the translation for Sonin. It's our mind and our thoughts. From now on, we enter the world of Sonin. Johrei is not so important anymore. Sonin comes first. So pray in your hearts. Meishu-sama was trying to wake us up into the world of spirit, right? Not the physical, the world of the unseen. To truly believe the unseen, to live in that rhythm of the unseen. Maybe many of you did not know this statement of Meishu-sama until today, or until very recently. But now that you know, what would you do about it? What should we do about it? I find that this is a fundamental question for each one of us. I've heard recently, right, so many people debating, I didn't know about this. Why weren't we informed about this? Why weren't we told? But rather than spending our energy, right, trying to figure out why or why not we weren't told this, now that we know, at this moment, what are we going to do about it? Each one of us, individually. What are we going to do now that we know this truth? Meishu-sama is allowing us to finally know, right? We are being reminded of these words. What are we going to do about it? Should we just ignore it? Should we just interpret it in a way that suits us so that we can continue what we have been doing up until now? Or should we receive it just as it is? How many of you today participating in the study session think that after Meishu-sama's ascension, Meishu-sama died? Meishu-sama is not alive anymore. I think it's easier in some ways, in our convenience, to think in such a way. But if we truly believe Meishu-sama is alive, God is alive, then Meishu-sama must be asking us at this very moment, what are you going to do about it? And if truly we believe that Meishu-sama is alive, I think we only have one option, is to receive it just as is. Receive this revolutionary message from Meishu-sama just as is. If not, we're just going to keep living in a state of mind centered on ourselves. We can't free ourselves from that animalistic self that we've just been studying about. We're just going to keep living in our convenience. And as we said today in the beginning, right? The hymn today was, the sole purpose we are here is to please God, is to bring happiness to God. If it is to bring happiness to God, then the only thing we can do is truly receive this message just as is. Or else we're seeking to please ourselves, to continue living in a way that we can interpret Meishu-sama's message to our convenience. Masaki-sama continued in the video, right? Let me emphasize that this statement, from now on, we enter the world of Sone. Johrei is not so important anymore. Is not something said by Kyoshu-sama. It came from Meishu-sama. Kyoshu-sama didn't say, okay, we're now in the age of Sone, so let's do this. Let's serve through our Sone. No, it came from Meishu-sama. This was not Kyoshu-sama saying this. It came from Meishu-sama. Johrei is not so important anymore. It came from Meishu-sama. And you know what else? For a very long time, we've been ignoring it. Even after we were shown this truth, you can say fairly recent, in recent years, as we've been studying Kyoshu-sama's messages. Have we truly received this message? Are we truly seeking to go deeper into what it means to serve God through the Sone? Or are we still fighting with our old selves? With what we are accustomed, what we learned, what we thought was correct? Instead of taking the opportunity through our thoughts and feelings to surrender everything back to God and serve God through His Johrei, are we still seeking an activity, a physical way to serve God? Through a physical activity, be it Johrei, nature farming, beauty. One day, when you go to heaven and meet Meishu-sama, he might ask you, I said to you that Johrei is not so important anymore, and that from now on, we enter the world of Sone. Remember this? What have you done about it? He might ask you something like this. How are you going to answer this question? What if we return to heaven today and Meishu-sama asks us this question? Can we be truly honest with Meishu-sama and say, I received that message and tried living it? Or I've been finding some kind of excuse to continue my convenient way of life? What I thought was pleasing and what I thought would bring happiness to me. What are you going to say to Meishu-sama? So we have to decide, how should we respond to this statement of Meishu-sama regarding Johrei and Sone? It is up to each one of us to decide. Again, everybody asks about free will. We're being given the choice. What do we decide? How are we going to respond to Meishu-sama? Sorry. I'm getting a call here and got interrupted in the meeting here, even though I did put silent mode. How are we going to respond to Meishu-sama? I apologize. To those who decide to ignore it or interpret it in a way that suits their needs, I have nothing to say except that I hope they can become true followers of Meishu-sama one day. There's a clear line being drawn. We have to decide for ourselves. Do we truly want to accept this message and become a true follower of Meishu-sama? Or ignore it and interpret it and lie to ourselves thinking we are following Meishu-sama? It's a question to each one of us. To those who are willing to accept it and believe in Meishu-sama with all their heart, I have good news. We have Kyoshu-sama with us. Kyoshu-sama, I believe, was the first one to truly receive this will of Meishu-sama. And he so wishes for us to walk this path with him, to become a true follower of Meishu-sama. He's tirelessly working for the past several decades now to awaken us to this true wish of Meishu-sama, and how blessed we are if we truly accept this message of Meishu-sama. But what does it mean? And this is my question, right? What does it mean to accept Meishu-sama with all our heart? Oh, I accept and that's it? Masaki-sama goes deeper, explaining to us how to truly accept Meishu-sama with all our heart. If we accept this statement of Meishu-sama 100%, it is clear that we cannot have Johrei as our main practice any longer, as he's saying that it is not so important anymore. Right? To truly accept this, then the physical practice of Johrei cannot be our main practice anymore, because we are in the age of Sonne, not in the age of physical practice. Right? We are learning the true essence of what Johrei is. I think up to now we've learned the outer aspect of what Johrei is, right? More of the physical aspect of what Johrei is. We are being given the opportunity to learn the essence of what Johrei is. We're going deeper into serving through this work of Johrei, God's Johrei. We're being given that opportunity right now. But we can't be stuck on the outer shell of what we thought Johrei was, or the superficial understanding of Johrei that we've had up to now. If we accept this statement of Meishu-sama 100%, it is clear that we cannot have Johrei as our main practice any longer, as he's saying that it is not so important anymore. How can we continue something that Meishu-sama said is not so important anymore? Meishu-sama was saying that, but we continue. Meishu-sama was saying that, but it pleases me to raise my hand. Meishu-sama was saying that to us, trying to awaken us. But I feel better when I sit and I raise my hand for Johrei. That is our individual self still fighting with God, not wanting to truly accept God's wish, seeking our own happiness and not God's happiness. But Kyoshu-sama is saying that we don't need to abandon Johrei. On the contrary, we're learning what Johrei truly is and how to truly serve through God's Johrei. He's saying that true Johrei is not done by us, with us raising our hands. He's saying that the true Johrei is done by God within each one of us. Within all humanity, God is raising his hand of Johrei to us. Several times I've heard the comment, right? Minister, I want to receive the real Johrei. I don't want to talk about sonin today. I want to receive the real Johrei, where we sit down and we raise our hands. That's the real Johrei. No, that is not the real Johrei. And I believe that I'm being allowed to hear such comments and such feelings because God is showing through his great love and light that those feelings also exist in me. Feelings that still don't want to accept the true essence of Johrei. Don't want to accept God channeling Johrei. Prefer to see that we humans are doing something and not God. So I've been surrendering those, recognizing that they also exist in me. Also exist in many of my ancestors, alive within me. And through the name of Messiah, I've been surrendering that back to God. But Kyoshu-sama is teaching us the true Johrei is done by God within each one of us. Within all humanity, God is raising his hand of Johrei to us. Kyoshu-sama is saying that God emits his light of Johrei to each one of us so that we can return to where the light is, to where God is, so that we can be one with God and live with him in heaven. The ultimate purpose of Johrei is for us to be able to return to heaven, where the light is, where God is, become one with God and live with him in heaven. But that is only possible through God's Johrei, not the physical part, me raising my hand, thinking that I am doing Johrei. Again, Kyoshu-sama is saying that God emits his light of Johrei to each one of us so that we can return to where the light is, to where God is, so that we can be one with God and live with him in heaven. The whole purpose is for us to please God, correct? We came here to please God, for God's happiness. What would please God most? To be able to live with us in his heaven. So God is illuminating everything and using everything and teaching us how to do that through God's Johrei, illuminating every thought and every feeling we have for that sole purpose, for us to be born anew as God's children and live with him in this heaven. Meishu-sama said, Johrei is not so important anymore. Kyoshu-sama is saying that what Meishu-sama meant by this is that the physical act of raising one's hand when practicing Johrei is not so important anymore. Meishu-sama said, from now on, we enter the world of sonin. Sonin comes first, so pray in your hearts. 66 years ago, Meishu-sama was showing us this. From now on, we enter the world of sonin. So pray in your hearts. Sonin comes first. Pray in your hearts. Kyoshu-sama is showing us how to do that. How fortunate we are. Because honestly, without Kyoshu-sama, I would have no idea how to even start. How blessed we are. But we need to truly accept this message of Meishu-sama. 100%. No questions asked. Meishu-sama, I don't understand it, but I want to receive this message. I want to make God happy. I surrender my life back to God, in service to God, as Meishu-sama did. We need to have that kind of firm decision within us. Kyoshu-sama is saying that what Meishu-sama meant by this is that we have to acknowledge that God and his hand of Johrei exists in our hearts, and that the true work of Johrei is by God. that the true work of Johrei by God is carried out within us all the time. So Johrei is not something that happens once a day, twice a day. When I sit down, I raise my hand and I'm exchanging that Johrei. That is not the Johrei. True Johrei is being done by God, within us, carried out by God all the time. But we need to acknowledge God in His hand of Johrei. By us refusing that truth, we're refusing God. We're refusing Johrei in itself. We're keeping the doors in our heart closed to God. Kyoshu-sama is saying that what Meishu-sama meant by this statement is that God will no longer carry out this work of salvation through us raising our hands of Johrei, but God will carry it out through our hearts. This is very, very big, right? I actually put it in bold. God will no longer carry out this work of His work of salvation through us raising our hands of Johrei. There was a time when God did that, but God will no longer do such. God will carry out through our hearts. What does it mean for God to carry out His work of salvation through our hearts? That's a very important question. And Meishu-sama says, in our everyday lives, through many things like through our relationships with our families, friends, or neighbors, many emotions come to our hearts, don't they? Those emotions come to you because the light of God is illuminating your heart. We feel everything we feel because God is carrying out His work through and within us. All our emotions, God is illuminating our hearts. And because of that, we have these emotions. Imagine, he says, when light shines on something, it creates a shadow, doesn't it? It is exactly like this. All the negative thoughts and feelings you have are like the shadows. God is illuminating your heart, and He's showing you the shadows so that He can save them. So again, God wants to live with us in His heaven. To do that, He's showing us those shadows for Him to save. Through God's Johrei, God is illuminating our hearts, showing all those shadows for us to surrender it back to God so He can save them. Our task is to obediently surrender what we feel into the hand of God, because He's always raising His hand of Johrei to us. He's always illuminating our hearts. That's our sole task, is to surrender that back to God obediently. Like Meishu-sama has been saying, pray in your hearts. Pray in your hearts means to constantly return that to God. And Kyoshu-sama has been showing us that through the name Messiah. Meishu-sama said, from now on, we need to pray in our hearts. He's saying that from now on, that is the task of his followers. So let us pray in our hearts and surrender whatever we feel into the hand of God, because that is how we can truly serve in the work of Johrei in the era of Sonnen. I believe all of us want to truly follow Meishu-sama. And I believe all of us want to truly serve God and to please God, to make God happy. And I believe all of us want to become truly happy also. All we need to do is to obediently surrender everything God is illuminating back to God through the name Messiah. That is the only thing that's being asked of us. We try to comprehend and we try to justify why we should or shouldn't do, how we should and shouldn't act. But Meishu-sama is not asking that. God is simply asking us to obediently acknowledge Him, recognize it, recognize His light, recognize what He wants to save, and surrender that back to God through the name Messiah. On paper, it seems fairly easy, right? But it's on a day-to-day basis to constantly serve in this work of Johrei that God is realizing in each one of our hearts through the Sonin. We are so blessed. We are in that age. We are in the age of day, in the age of Sonin. So we have to learn to live in that age with the proper tools. Understand how the Sonin works. It's like trying to live in the space age where rockets and satellites are the utmost technology, but we're still sending messages through pigeons, right? And fighting that. We have all the tools to do what we need to do. We just need to acknowledge God being alive within our heart, surrendering ourselves in every thought and every feeling that we are having in this new era. And trust Meishu-sama 100%. Oh, I look forward to part 2 of this study. I encourage everybody to watch this video, read previous messages and Kyoshu-sama's guidances, but it's very, very clear, very, very defined, right? And it's a clear choice. How are we going to do from now on? Which path are we choosing? To truly accept Meishu-sama and follow him 100%, or continue living to our convenience, thinking that we are following Meishu-sama. I look forward to our study sessions next week. Tomorrow we'll be doing it in Portuguese, and please join us in our services during the days and in the weekend also. I look forward to part 2 with everybody next week. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.